Welcome everyone to a new story, which has a series of quite dark seasonings. Not only because of what happened to this boy, if not, because he also has a series of events and decisions that they finished for dissolving the peace and joy of a family. I would love to know what you think about this case. And at the end of the video you can leave me your comments, since without a doubt, and I can assure you, that if one put oneself in the place of any of the protagonists, it is impossible not to feel a certain discomfort. Please do not forget to subscribe, and if you can share the video. This is how they help me to make these stories reach more people. Now yes, we begin with the story. I would like to share something that happened to me some years ago. For family reasons and to avoid some problems, I'm going to ignore the names of each one, even mine, since I don't want to bother anyone. This story that I am going to tell you happened to my family, specifically to my mother, and I think that for some reason that I don't know, at a certain point, everything transferred to me. We are from South Houston, Texas. My family is made up of my mother, my two sisters, and my father who died a few years ago. I have to admit that I couldn't say exactly when did it all start, because as kids, we always had a happy life, without problems and without fights. As I told you, nothing weird ever happened in the house. But at some point everything changed for the worse. Today I am 38 years old. But before I get to what happened to me recently, I wanted to tell you some of the many things that happened in my house. When I was younger, I estimate that I would have been between 16 or 17 years old. It was that I began to realize that something had changed at home. And to this day I am certain that my mom was responsible for all our misfortunes. She became friends with a neighbor who used to throw her tarot cards. And it was at that moment that she began to get into the esoteric world. Her curiosity was pushing her to want to learn more and more, to the point of no return. He started reading a lot, to investigate different ways to do magic works, and all that kind of issues associated with witchcraft and occultism. I think everything was very slow, but progressive, where she was isolating herself from us every day more and more. I'm telling you this because, from being an affectionate and super cheerful person, she became a totally different person. Her light and brightness faded. I don't know how to explain it well. She always spent her time singing and smiling, and from one day to the next, she never did it again. She really liked to have fun with board games. I remember we used to do it quite often. After dinner, we always got together as a family to enjoy the games together. But as she did with singing, she stopped wanting to do it. She preferred to be alone reading in the living room without anyone bothering her. She also started to be nervous and quite aggressive. She would talk back to you in a very bad way for no reason. And she quarreled a lot with my father. Something that before was always quite sporadic. With this I want to make it clear that her change was slow but very marked. Another very important detail was that my mother was not a very religious person. Although she was Catholic, she was never a practitioner nor was she very interested in these issues. She began to worship different deities, until then unknown to our family. In fact, she had set up a small altar, where she used to place different types of images and stamps, to which she worshipped and prayed to them. She started hanging out a lot more often with that neighbor friend that I told you about. And in fact she was the only one he got along with. My dad in many of the fights told him that he had to leave all that, what he had gotten himself into, that every day we were getting worse, and that it was a mistake for her to get together with that woman. Speaking specifically of this neighbor, the point was that my mom started doing these jobs at home, usually when my dad was working. And if she didn't do it at night, when we were all asleep. There were times, and I'm not exaggerating, who stayed for hours in front of her altar, saying prayers that were unintelligible, lighting candles, cigarettes, or leaving whiskey, as a kind of offering, I suppose. Among all the images that he had on this altar, we realized that the one he adored and prayed the most was a statuette of Saint Death. One certain night, it was that we began to notice that something bad was happening at home, during the early morning and while we were all asleep. One of my sisters, who at that time would have been about 13 or 14 years old, woke us all up with her screams. Apparently she saw in front of her bed a woman dressed in black, standing and staring at her. The truth is that my parents did not give it much importance, and they told her that it had only been a dream. But as the days and weeks went by, this woman and other entities saw each other much more frequently. My sister not only saw her on many occasions, but she swore to us that one morning she woke up when something pushed her with such force, which managed to throw it to the floor. On another occasion, being with my dad, while we were sitting in the kitchen, we saw the figure of a completely dark man, as if he were a black shadow, who was passing through the corridor in the direction of the bedrooms. The truth is that the atmosphere in the house became horrible. There were more and more fights. My younger sister, who was about 10 years old, began to wet the bed. She also claimed to see shadows in the house, and from time to time she had horrible nightmares. Strikingly, the only one who was not heard to say anything about all this was my mother, who, despite the fact that my father wanted to throw all that altar that he had at her, and reproached her for stopping doing witchcraft work, that they were turning against their own family, she continued in her world as if nothing had happened. The truth is that every day everything was worse. The years passed, and as soon as I could, I moved. My two sisters, my father and my mother, stayed in that house. The reality was that at first, I was extremely happy to have left. It pains me to say it, but it's the truth. I felt a great relief to get out of that house and get rid of everything that was going on in there. And what affected me the most was being happy not to be around my mother. But all was not well. Sometime after I moved, one night, it was that I woke up and saw a dark shadow in front of my bed, and next to her the silhouette of this woman that my sister had mentioned so much to us. I just saw them and nothing else. I covered myself, and after a few minutes they were gone. The first thing I thought was that perhaps it had only been part of my own suggestion, but I was completely wrong. Later nights she would come back to see them again. Sometimes I only saw one, and other times, I saw both together. They were just standing there, looking at my bed while I was sleeping. It occurred to me, on the advice of a friend to whom I told all this, place an image of St. George on the bedside table, to protect me, and I can swear to you that after doing it, never in my life was I so scared. That same night, I woke up when something hit my bed with a lot of force, and when I turned on the light on the nightstand, I realized that the little painting with the image of St. George, I was upside down. It was something totally inexplicable, because how this little square was placed. It was impossible for something like this to happen. When I told this to my friend, she told me that I had to seek urgent help at the church. And so I did. I spoke with a priest from the church and he gave me some advice. But the most important thing was not to be afraid of these entities. Pray a lot and not give them importance. Because it is precisely what these entities want to be able to feed their own energy. I swear I tried everything, and for a while it all seemed to have calmed down. But one night, a girl I was dating came to my apartment for dinner. And while I was in the kitchen sitting at the table after dinner, she went to the bathroom. Something I want to highlight before continuing is that she was not aware of anything. about the paranormal issues of my life, nor the things my mother did, nor the shadows I saw. Suddenly I heard a tremendous scream and she ran out of the bathroom. She told me that she was washing her hands, and when she looked in her mirror, she saw a woman behind her, standing looking at her. She couldn't give me details, because she didn't stop to take a good look at her, but when she turned around, she was no more. Then he left the bathroom as fast as he could. I told him at that moment, and very briefly, part of what was happening to me lately. And from that night she never wanted to go back to the apartment again. In fact, we didn't last much longer as a couple. In my life, several other things happened. Among them the death of my father, one afternoon while he was watching television. And totally unexpectedly, my sisters also became independent, assuring me that they couldn't stand being in that house with my mom anymore. Unfortunately, to this day, my mother is still in the same situation, isolated from all of us, totally immersed in esoteric and witchcraft issues. In fact, she had a lot of problems with some neighbors in the area for these issues. I try to stay away, and I think it's dangerous to be around her. Precisely, I think that what happened to me for years, these entities that persecuted me, were 100% their fault. For getting into dark topics that I was unaware of. What's more, the entire family fell apart, the fault of my mom and the damn neighbor. For my part, in the year 2015, was that I got to know a person who really helped me. He came to my apartment, he did a cleaning, and he also did it to me, explaining to me that these entities that followed me would do so wherever I go, regardless of whether I moved or not. They had been with me for years, and knowing my mom's history, she confirmed that surely all that was the cause. Luckily, this person was able to free me from these bad energies, and everything got better. To this day I have never seen this shadow again, nor the woman. And I hope that everything continues in this way. A question that surely many are asking themselves. It's about what happened with my sisters. They told me that once they left the house, they never experienced paranormal events again. Therefore, when they got out of there, they got rid of that heavy vibe. The only thing that hurts me today, and I am very sorry, is not to see my mom. But I assure you, the mere thought of going to visit her terrifies me. Undoubtedly, this story causes us some discomfort. It's not nice to hear that a family is separated, and that a mother is left alone, immersed in dangerous issues. But it is also understood that everyone seeks their own path, where one feels comfortable and happy. Friends, thank you for reaching the end of this video. I send a big hug to all of you.